Welcome everybody for the second online edition of Digital Analytics Wednesday. We just had some last technical glitch to fix, but we're happy that's resolved. So thanks very much for tuning in. Before we start, I'd like to introduce myself and my team members. So my name is Eva from the Digital Analytics Wednesday team, and together with my teammate Harry, we'll be leading you through the evening today. And we also have Jeremy, John, and Zach from our team working in the background, making this session possible. What is Digital Analytics Wednesday? Because I'm conscious that a few of you will tune in for the second time. So we are an informal meetup of digital enthusiasts who come together on a monthly basis to talk about anything related to digital analytics, digital marketing, to share our knowledge, share our passion. It's all a volunteer-led group, so we have day jobs as well, and we do this in our free time. Same as our speakers, they also have their day jobs, and they join us in their free time to share their knowledge with you. Normally, we would meet somewhere in Singapore for the Singapore edition in the CBD. We'll have pizza and beer. Unfortunately, that's not possible at the moment. But the beauty of this online edition is that we can also have our fellow enthusiasts from Malaysia and Indonesia join us. So very welcome to our audience from those two countries as well. And I'll hand over now to Hari, who is leading you through the agenda. But before I do that, I want to do a big shout out to our sponsors who are making this session possible. So that's Happy Marketer, Decision Science, and eClerks. Those three sponsors are the ones behind making this session possible. Harry, please share what's on the agenda today and introduce our speakers.
Sure, thank you, Eva. Looking at the link as well, Eva, our community is still tuning in, so we'll give them some more time before we kick off with the agenda and set the stage. And we'll just share the link as well. So just give some more minutes for our members to tune in, and then we'll start off with the agenda and with the first talk. So we have our members tuning in one by one. Hello from Malaysia. Hi. We're just waiting for a few more of our peers to dial in, right? Giving them time to join the stream as well, because we just sent out the link. We'll start soon. We see BB Muru. So, did you enjoy the Grab food voucher that you won last time? So, for the context speaker, so one of the audience has joined as the winner who got the Grab food voucher last time for one of the session. Good to see you again.
I think I'll just make a quick introduction again because we had quite a few of you joining us late. I think we had an issue with the link. Apologies for that. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Welcome to the second online edition of Digital Analytics Wednesday. So Digital Analytics Wednesday is a volunteer-led group. We're a group of digital enthusiasts like yourself, and we come together on a monthly basis to share knowledge, to have discussions, to network. And so myself and my team, we also have our day jobs. But we do this out of our passion. And same for our speakers. They also have their day jobs, but they spend their free time to join us for this session and share their knowledge. So you also have the chance to ask questions at the end of every session. Make use of the chat in YouTube, and the speakers will take time to answer them. At this point, also a big shout out to our sponsors, Decision Science, Happy Marketer, and eClerks, who make these kind of sessions possible. And normally we would be getting together somewhere for the Singapore session in the CDB. We would have some pizza and beers. Unfortunately, that's not possible at the moment. But the upside of this is that we can also welcome an audience from Malaysia and Indonesia to our Singapore session at the same time. So welcome also for those of you that joined from Malaysia and Indonesia. And Hari from the Digital Analytics team will lead you through the agenda now. Also on board today are Jeremy, John, and Zach, who are managing all of the tech in the background. So thanks also to them for the work they're doing. Hari, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Eva. Hello, everyone again. Thanks for tuning in. I missed your busy Wednesday. So agenda for today is our standard schedule where we'll have our first speaker, and then a small change where instead of the demo, unlike last time, we'll have the second speaker take us through the topic, and then the demo session would be the third one. So the first one is more on the COVID, a very timely one, and we'll have Ashmita from Starhub present to us on that, while the second topic would be from Julie, ngwaste.ai from Malaysia, taking us through, how do we quickly set up experiments for paid media and your advertising, right? Smart marketing. And then we have Edward joining us from Mixpanel to do a product showcase and quick demo on how do you identify your funnel drop-offs and then identify the cohort to whom you can reactivate through messaging. All this within Mixpanel platform itself. Right. So that would be the agenda. Like last time, we'll go full on, no break. You can feel free to walk around and take break because it's not a physical meeting per se. So to start off with, Ashmita, thank you for joining us. To introduce Ashmita, so she is heading the digital and social insights at Starhub, and she has worked in companies like Accenture and Intel before. She has 9 years of experience around digital analytics and has been a regular speaker. In fact, I still recollect 2 years ago, at the Adobe Summit Singapore, you did speak about data governance, Observe Point, and how we are leveraging that. So yeah, looking forward to this topic from you on business analytics, for essential services given the COVID situation. Thank you for joining us again, and over to you.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for joining me on a Wednesday evening. I know it's been a long day. So I'm going to share my screen now on business analytics in a COVID world for essential services. Let me know if you can see. Can everybody see the screen?
Yes, Ash, we can see.
Great. So I hope everybody is safe and healthy in the comfort of their homes. And I hope by now, after, I don't know, 2 months of circuit breaker and several lockdowns around the world, we have a fairly good idea of what essential services are and what non-essential services are, right? So before we deep deeper, because personally for me, it was not very clear. 2 months ago, I did not know exactly what was an essential service and what was a not so essential service. So I gained a lot of clarity after last 2 months of COVID situation handling. So I take a leaf out of the government.sg page, and I now know that health services, certain areas of the health services are essential, not all areas. Certain areas of food services are essential, not all foods. Bubble tea is not essential. Liquor is not essential, unfortunately. Banking and financial services are essential. Hardware logistics are essential. Telco, energy generation, all these are essential services. On the contrary, shopping malls, liquor shops, bubble tea, recreation culture, pet supply, barber shops, these are not so essential. They are non-critical. And we have seen larger industries like tourism, air travel, hospitality, air services, all of that. They actually had to shut down during the circuit breaker period. And, because I live and work in Singapore, whatever I'm going to say over the next 10-15 minutes is going to be heavily influenced by the situation in Singapore, especially the circuit breaker period, when a lot of these non-essential services had to either shut shop or only run their business online. And a lot of these essential services actually saw a surge in demand, and at the same time, they had to change their operating models significantly in order to continue to be viable. I have here a few clippings from newspaper headlines which will tell you how the situation for the essential services. Okay, so financial services remain open and viable. Okay, safe distancing has become a very important thing. Even at hawker centers and markets, this was something that was unimaginable because they're typically very crowded areas where there is not much of a crowd control in hawker centers. Sports physical facilities have closed down. Finance, e-payments continue along with safe distancing measures. Public services also have safe distancing, etc. Right? So we see how essential services have had to switch over their delivery of products and services online. For some essential services, they were prepared before COVID. A lot of them had already shifted to a partial online delivery model. For many essential services, it was a complete new ballgame. A lot of these essential services had to operate using much lower staff on the ground, which meant that their operational efficiency was reducing. At the same time, demand was surging. They had to deal with disrupted supply chain, which meant that they couldn't depend on global supply chains. They had restricted physical delivery times, and digital had become the primary mode of communication. Okay, so it was a completely new world for many of these essential services. And the crux of it all, I guess, essentially boils down to the need to ramp up to a digital infrastructure for business continuity management. Now, for our discussion today, I'm going to pick 3 industries: food retail, telco, and financial services. All these 3 industries were essential services, but with different level of maturity for these, in digital for these essential services, right? So we want to see how COVID impacted the business models and therefore how business analytics was impacted because their business models changed. Let's look at food retail now. Okay. What I have for you on this slide is a snapshot of the kind of conversations that were happening in food retail industry in Singapore as recently as January. So you see how coffee shops, this was a coffee shop in Jurong East, I think, which was being valued at a whopping $31 million thing. There are new food restaurants opening up in Marina Bay Sands, and Impossible Foods is launching a new line of food products, and some of the bigger players are experimenting with things like robotics and automation. Okay, so this was the scenario in January. Now, my next slide shows you how things changed in May. Okay, now have a look at the kind of conversations that were happening in May. Yeah, a lot of these conversations center around how these regular retail chains are tying up with delivery, new delivery partners, Deliveroo, Ebb, Food Panda, Gojek. There is a new set of ancillary services coming up. For example, Chopcart is a new app which will show you what are the available slots for online delivery. Because demand is so high, companies cannot cope with increased demand for online delivery. There is a huge surge in credit card spending. Yeah? Local hawkers are also resorting to alternative food delivery options. Yeah? So things have changed quite a bit in May. Pre-COVID, while there is a buzzing market, post-COVID, people are talking about cashless transactions, apps to alert delivery slots, delivery chains have sprouted, home-cooked food, all the ingredients that are needed in home-cooked food. The demand for these ingredients has shot up. And another very interesting line of conversation that has opened up is scrutiny of the supply chain. How much are we self-reliant? And how much are we dependent on the global supply chain for essentials such as food? It's a new kind of conversation. And I know the government of Singapore has declared the 30 by 30 plan, which by 2030, they want 30% of global, of the food chain to be, sourced locally. So this is a new kind of conversation that we have seen happening post-COVID. Therefore, obviously, analytics will also change depending on the business need. What you have before you is a very interesting infographic. This is from the COVID era of the last 2 months. This shows how a chain of events across the globe has impacted the global food delivery chain. Yeah. So the impact on business analytics has been on multiple areas, a lot of it having to do with logistics and demand management. So demand management of locally available foods and ingredients for home cooking, logistics and global supply chain management for perishables. When smaller vendors, they start experimenting with new channels like online delivery, a lot of tertiary problems open up. For example, how do you cope with things like delivery delays, wrong orders, billing issues online? What is the kind of analytics you need? What are the efficiencies in the analytics you need to be able to help you optimize? Even for players like Redmart, which had a fairly strong online business running, we find that they had to change their business operating model too. Delivery slots were not available for everybody inside Singapore in all locations at all times of the day. People could not order more than two numbers of a particular item. People could not order more than 35 items inside one cart. So these were new restrictions. The impact of these new restrictions on demand, at what point should delivery options be opened up? How do you plan out the routes so that a delivery truck is able to service maximum households in the shortest possible time? These are new business questions. They were perhaps relevant before COVID as well, but they gained a lot more significance after or during the COVID crisis. Let's look at telco now, which is a very different industry. telco, in fact, telcos all over the world, they have invested significantly in their infrastructures, in their network capability. So for a telco, especially a traditional telco that has been running for several decades, they have a certain standard business operating model. It is not easy for a telco to suddenly switch stream and go over into a new business operating model because there are very significant infrastructure requirements, especially on the investment front. So let's see how the conversations in the telco industry changed pre and post COVID. These are conversations from the press in January. You see how some telco players are bidding for the 5G license. You see how conversations are on about how the industry is going to consolidate and the smaller telco players will have a difficult life after 5G rollout. You see some experimentation on AI solutions in some of the telcos. And you see how app security is a priority for some of the telcos. So data privacy concerns have, telcos are already worried about these things. And they're doing things to resolve, security issues, etc. Look at the conversations and how they changed in May, which was in the circuit breaker period in Singapore. Yeah. So during the circuit breaker period, the telcos were called upon to execute the government's COVID policies. What do I mean by this? When the government says that we want to roll out home-based learning for the children who will not be going to schools now, the telcos will need to ensure that low-income households have SIM cards and routers so that children from low-income households can access home-based learning. So you have TPG providing free SIM cards. You have Starhub, which is giving out smartphones to migrant workers so that they can be traced by the government using the COVID tracking app. So that is happening on one end. On the other end, you see a huge demand for gaming chairs, streaming services, meeting software, music, right? So the scenario has changed. The business conversations have changed significantly from January to May, right? So there is very high demand for data connectivity and high data speed. A lot of people are working from home, which means that a lot of the areas in Singapore which did not have much demand for data connectivity or high data speeds during weekdays now have to face a demand surge which is almost 4 times because there are two partners in a particular household accessing their offices constantly. If they have 2 children, an average normal family size, these children are also accessing home-based learning software on their own devices. So demand for network connectivity has increased 4 times within a period of months for telcos. Telco personnel are actually risking their personal health to go out into immigrant care centers in order to ensure that all these care centers have Wi-Fi connections, because these immigrants need to stay connected with their own family in different countries. There's also increased demand for routers inside HPL homes. At the same time, telcos are also very concerned about providing seamless digital experiences for online services like purchases, billing, account management, things like that. So how did the analytics pan out in this new business world for telcos? On the right, you have a chart from DBS. This is a DBS group research on equity, which shows how the demand for broadband connections is going to increase over the next couple of years. So telcos had to deal with network connectivity and demand management. All the analytics that help them operate smoothly, they have that was relevant for network connectivity, that became very important. So there is a lot of data inside the telco space, which is often disjointed and siloed. It's very important now in the post-COVID world that telcos are able to link it up and are able to say that if I have a customer who belongs to a particular area in Singapore, this customer is accessing certain entertainment content on my channels. So I should be able to stream that content seamlessly at high speed and provide good pricing for that kind of content, right? So there's a lot of analytics at the back end to be able to make this kind of strategy decision, right? Digital journey mapping and optimization. That kind of analytics also has become very important. Another very interesting area for telcos is chatbot analytics, I think, which became very, very important during the COVID. You have to realize that the telcos that were receiving a lot of these servicing calls had to shut down their call centers during COVID, which meant that even though some of these employees who were working in the call centers could take a few calls from their own homes, the total volume of calls that the telcos could now take had come down significantly. What that means is they are trying to get chatbots to bridge the gap and to ensure that customers don't need to call anymore to resolve basic queries. So the analytics for the chatbots, what kind of questions are they getting resolved properly? That analytics becomes very important in order to aid businesses and to optimize that area. Next, let's look at financial services. Financial services have been, they have been a very mature player, I would say, in the Singapore market. So way back in January, their customer base was already very used to digital platforms for availing financial services. There was a significant amount of trust that the biggest players had already established with their customers, who were fairly comfortable in using mobile devices or online devices to do their financial transactions. So that was a good thing. They were prepared, at least more than some of these other industry players, in switching to all digital mode of transaction. So in January, you see conversations on how several non-banking players were bidding for digibanking license. This is an indicator of how this field for financial services is already very mature inside the digital space. Now, post-COVID, you see how financial services has leveraged the situation further and tapped into new market segments. So you see how they are trying to get migrant workers accustomed to a cashless world. You see how they are looking at the SME segment for growth. And you see how even in a year of declared recession, DBS is going to hire more than 2,000 employees. Yeah. So I would say in the post-COVID world, there is a lot of conversation happening on cashless banking, virtual banking, new market segments like SMEs, and the conversations on relationship banking, for example, they have become less strong. ATM and hard cash have become even less relevant in the post-COVID world. So then, how does the analytics get impacted? Let's have a look. I would say, so financial services are in a pretty sensitive area. They require trust from their customers on two fronts. One is the technology, because customers will be exchanging hard-earned money-related transactions through their platforms. The second level of trust is with the communication level of the banks on the digital platforms. What I mean by that is, because financial services often deal with products that are that can be pretty complex for a regular consumer, their digital platforms have to be simple enough to be able to provide all facts related to that will help the decision making of the customer in the online space without a relationship manager in the middle. So their analytics has to focus on how to make this journey simple and seamless for the customer. So on one hand, things like fraud analytics will help ensure that the technology is safe and secure and it has earned the customer's trust, and he can transact without worry on the platform. On the other hand, the banker has to have a lot of analytics to ensure that all his products related to wealth, insurance, tax, trade management, which can be pretty complex products, are explained in such an easy way, and the online journey is so easy that the customer finds it relatively easy to make an informed decision on it and is able to buy or trade with the product. Another area of importance, I would think, for business analytics in the post-COVID world for financial services is how the digibanking licenses for non-banking players, how they play out with the traditional banking environment. So going forward, and I haven't experienced a lot of it myself, but I am looking forward to see how this area pans out. When, let's say, a Grab gets a banking license, and it already has access to a lot of transportation data for customers, how does it cross-pollinate that data with the banking analytics to come up with a higher value proposition for the customer? This would be an interesting area of play in the post-COVID world, and I'm very happy to see, follow this trend to see where it goes. With that, I come to the last slide of my presentation. So this slide basically lists out the responses of a survey that was done by Mix. Mix is a software development company in Ukraine. So this survey wanted to find out how analytics will change in the COVID world. So a lot of what we talked about is further nuanced by the responses, and these are good areas to ponder about. For example, look at point number 3. So there's a situation here, and business owners want to know how to screen out pandemic-related behavior from the analytics and then do the training. Yeah. And there is another point here, if you follow my cursor, there is need for data on the operational impact caused by the crisis from things like sick employees, recovered employees, mapped by location on a map. So these are very interesting and new areas of analytics. We hadn't explored these kind of things earlier, even 2 months ago. Yeah. The second last point is also very important. Identify what are guests doing in the absence of our brands in the entertainment market. So entertainment has shut down, movie halls have shut down, restaurants, bars have shut down. How are people entertaining themselves? If we get that data, it will be an eye-opener for new kind of startups to open up. That's a whole new area for exploration fueled by analytics. So I think this is a very good list to ponder on, and I'll leave you with that thought. Thank you so much. Let me know if you have any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ash. That did give us different perspectives. I'm just waiting for the lag. Sorry, got distracted. So on the questions, Ash, we've got one question from Ian Tan, who's our regular DAWS patron. And the question is more on, the type of campaign itself. We were speaking about, for example, Starhub, giving away smartphones for us to track, the affected people and their movements. On those same lines, right? From an analytics perspective, how do you think we can measure what empathy marketing drove, like purpose-driven marketing against your regular campaigns, or you would already have certain purpose-driven marketing campaigns planned? How do we differentiate between this COVID-related purpose-driven marketing efforts and the ROI versus the regular campaigns that would have been planned anyways?
Okay, without revealing a lot of the internal data, what I can tell you is, from my past experience in Singapore, this market seems to respond very strongly to purpose-driven marketing. And not just COVID, for the other initiatives that we have done in, during the National Day, or any other, or even for other companies, we know that purpose-driven marketing seems to work very well, and the level of engagement on purpose-driven marketing is very high. So yes, for the Singapore market, it seems to be work. It tends to really touch a few chords for the Singapore netizens.
Understood. Yeah, thanks, Ash. And Ianton says thanks as well. So he's got his question answered. So that's the only question we had so far. Guys, any other question? If you would want to ask, feel free to ping on the chat. Just give a few seconds, Ash, to see if others have any questions. Cool. Any other questions? We can take it offline as well, Ash. Thanks for your time. And I'll hand over to Eva for the second session.
There is one question that just came in. Maybe we can take that one. There was one question, or actually two. Yeah, people need a bit of time to type. That's the problem with the digital event. There's a bit of a lag. So if we could take two more questions, I think we have time. So Rohan is asking about more insights on supply chain analytics.
Insights on supply chain analytics.
Yeah.
I know that supply chain professionals had a really tough time during the COVID period. Their regular sources of procurement had changed drastically. There was a lot of uncertainty in the economy. Countries were locking down. More than 50% of humanity was under lockdown at some point in time over the last couple of months. So professionals in this area were working overtime across essential services and even non-essential services to ensure that their yearly forecasted numbers do not get impacted. I'm not saying that we have emerged unscathed at the end of the 2 months. But in terms of analytics, that has become very, very critical. And as I mentioned, there was this point on the food industry's bit, and I was reading the news. I understand it is also equally applicable for medical supplies. If you saw the news in the US, Donald Trump has given the license for a local company to produce COVID-related drugs. So global versus local in the supply chain area has become very, very important post-COVID. So that it is going to be very interesting to see how KPIs are formed for companies over the next couple of months to ensure that local materials are sourced locally, at least for the essential services, to a certain extent.
Understood. And yeah, Ash, one more question, again in general on financial services, right? I mean, I think more close to the grab digital banking that you were speaking about. So there is a sudden surge towards online solutions in financial services space. Do you foresee this to be a sustainable one over a long run? And is it essential to coexist with, the physical banking ways?
Well, I am no expert or no fortune teller.
Right.
But I do know that over 60% of the market is safely under the belt of the three biggest players in the financial service area. It will be very difficult to topple the three biggest players in Singapore, by these non-banking partners, and some of the market will get fragmented. And in the long run, there will be some consolidation. But interesting for me as a professional is to watch how, when these non-banking players come into the banking space, what does it do to the data? How do they come up with services that are new, more innovative, and more useful for the customer. I want to personally watch that as well over the next few months.
Got it. Got it. There's another question very similar on banking. So maybe it's again a general question, point of discussion as well. We can contribute more on, do you expect relationship management services in banks to be phased out post-COVID? Maybe because, customers are getting used to this virtual online mode of working.
Exactly.
What's
So,
there?
Yeah, I do think at least for retail banking, relationship managers will become less and less relevant as banks become more mature, are able to create simpler language for their products. Their products may be complex, but maybe they are able to present it in a very simple way so that normal people like you and me can understand the language and make investment decisions or trading decisions based on the communication that we receive from the digital platforms. So in the new world, personally, I do think relationship managers will have a lesser role for retail customers, but for enterprise customers, it's a different.
Right. Yeah, got it. Thank you, Ash. I think those were the questions. So if you could pick the best. So first one was from Ayanton on purpose-driven marketing. Second one was from Rohan on supply chain. Third one was from Gaurav on financial services, physical versus virtual. Last one was on the relationship management services from Faithworth.
All these are interesting questions, and I have a difficult choice, really. So I think, can I just blindly close my eyes and put my finger on any one of them? I think I'll just probably go with virtual versus physical banking. The person.
Okay. Yeah. Gaurav. So we'll reach out to you, Gaurav, and we'll take it from there in terms of the vouchers. And Ash, yeah, thanks again for your time. It was very useful session as well, a different perspective in terms of the essential services.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ash. And Eva, over to you for the second session.
Thank you, Ash. So now we come to the second topic of today, which I believe is a very important one. If you're in marketing, you've probably run some testing, some experience for your digital campaigns. And it might take a long time sometimes to get insights. It might also be very costly. And Julie, CEO from Vase.ai, is joining us today to tell us how we can run smart experiments in 24 hours. She has a wealth of experience. She has advised brands like Grab, Unilever, KFC on how to run experiments. And she will share her knowledge with us today. So Julie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here today. So day in, day out, what I do is creating different marketing experience for different brands across different industry. So today, right, my aim is to actually debunk certain myths that people have around marketing experiments and actually share with you some best practices that we usually saw certain clients of ours continuously make certain mistakes on, and hopefully all of us will be able to make much more effective marketing experience. So let me first start by sharing my screen. Iwa, can you help me a little bit? I can't seem to share my screen.
Yeah, one moment. I'm looking for it, Ash. Yeah.
Okay.
Now I think you can.
Yes. Great. So hopefully everyone can see my screen now.
Oh, good.
All right. Awesome. So today, I will focus on 4 best practices, 4 questions that I would usually ask myself if I were to run a marketing experience under a very low budget and a very short time. So before I start, I want to share a little bit on why marketing experiment, right? Why is it an important thing that I believe all marketers should continuously be doing and not just do once in a while? So this stats is something everyone probably a little bit more familiar. So when we run a survey to find out on how many percentage of corporates out there actually are confident that they have actually sufficient information to make decisions. Turns out a very big number, 90% of them actually makes a lot of decisions with insufficient information. And we know that 42% startups fail just because actually they are building certain things that nobody really wants. So because of that, right, we further drive down and look into what are the key decisions revolving around marketing that we are doing day in, day out. So here are some of the questions that we usually are trying to answer. So when it comes to brand and ads, we probably are thinking, is my brand healthy? Should I rebrand? Is there a different customer segment that I probably should focus on? Is my advertisements running as well as my competition or actually not? Which promotion is actually better? And if I were looking at customers and products related, I will be thinking, should I creating this new product in the first place? Does anyone actually want it? What strategy should I use to grow my product? Why people are not buying my product? And which messaging, which value propositions that I should be doing to actually stand out. So all of these questions are permeating in our life almost on a daily basis. And when we go deeper, right, you will notice there are two types of decisions there. The yellow one is what we call the strategic decisions, the big decisions that will probably affect your business in a big way in terms of you need to spend a lot of money if you want to change directions. So those are usually very directional decisions. But you will notice that it's actually a whole lot more decisions that is surrounding your daily operational basis that we call it tactical decisions. So tactical decisions is something that in general, what we notice, people generally don't spend time doing much marketing experiments. Despite a lot of people may say that there's actually a lot of tools out there that could help us do that. But what we found, a lot of companies actually don't do it consistent enough to have effective results. And that's the reason why until today, we actually see there's still a lot of product and marketing problems still rampant. Because most of us spend too much time doing experiments around the big strategic decisions, and we kind of overlook the tactical decisions which require shorter turnaround time and probably don't have budget for us to make any experiment, right? So these are the key things that I will debunk today. First myth, marketing experiment is usually so expensive. It takes months, it takes $25K US dollar, or at least that's amount of time. So today I'm going to prove you that it doesn't have to be that way. And what we realize is if we spend a sufficient amount of time actually focusing doing research on tactical decisions, you will find that there is a lot more decisions can be done in a much more data-driven way. So if I were to borrow a quote from Jeff Bezos, he says that if you double the number of experiments you do per year, you are going to double your inventiveness, and hopefully these sessions can help us to double that inventiveness. All right, let's go into it. So what exactly is a marketing experiment? Essentially, what people usually regard as marketing experiments are A/B testing of web pages, A/B testing of email design, or A/B testing of paid ads. Those are usually the very popular thing that people immediately think about. But if we actually go down to the root of what is marketing experiment, it's a form of market research. Basically, any test that you run that will help you to improve a campaign in terms of marketing, that can be considered a marketing experiment. And this is what I will be talking about today, that revolve more around product, concept, and ads. So here's some examples of what exactly you can test quickly and get results back in like less than 24 hours, right? So you can test whether or not your idea actually works before you even developed it, before you even develop a web page to show. You can test your packaging, you can test your pricing, even your promotions, and you can even test your name, for example, to see whether or not which name actually catch people's attention more. So I give you one example. This is a company that is based in US called the Mighty Handle. What they do is that they create handles for carrying heavy bags. So back in 2014, they faced one of the biggest opportunity in their life, in their startup life. So they have lined up an in-store test with Walmarts in the nationwide. And if that experiment is successful, their product will begin appearing on Walmart store shelf in 2015. So this is a new startup back then, and there's a lot of stake there. So they start with trying to, because the stake is so high, they decided that they cannot wait for the real tests to actually find out which product actually works. They decided to do a quick marketing experiment. So they first come up with a hypothesis. So they suspect that because the demographics of Walmart shoppers is usually a little bit different from their existing customers. It's usually more household, more suburban moms compared to their existing, which is much younger. So first, what they do is they research on past data from just pure free reviews online. Second, they come up with a list of concept to test based on the review or based on their ideas. So it's a literally brainstorming session where everyone just write on whatever ideas. So now, all these two things is probably something that you're very familiar. So how do they eventually finalize their ideas? Step 3, they actually use the consumer surveys to finalize the concepts. And it doesn't take them long to come up with that survey. They probably just spend less than 1 hour to come up with this survey. And then a few hours later, they actually get the data. So by then, right, that allows them to actually finalize the product concepts very quickly, but it haven't really come down to the final advertising concepts that they really wanted. So last step they do, they run a marketing campaigns to validate the advertising concepts. So eventually they come up, within a short few hours, they come up with the concept that actually works, and in the end, you will actually find that product in Walmart. So this is an example of a marketing experiment that actually paid off. So I'm going to go through a little bit of best practice later, that what they actually look for when they are creating this marketing experiment. But the takeaway, before I go to that, is that there is totally possible for us to test our idea in a very low risk campaign before we chase the big idea or initiating a large marketing spend. The second example that I want to share with you is ads related. So there are a lot of ads that we're continuously doing on a month-to-month basis, right? One of the most popular ads right now, all we know that is going to be more popular, is actually video ads. And when it comes to video ads, what we realize is there's so many things you can test, really. But there's actually one single important thing that if you need to throw everything, we need to keep one thing in mind, which is the first few seconds of the video. So what we notice is this. 76%, it's like 76% of YouTube audiences actually skip the ads. And you probably are one of them. And when they don't skip it, you'll be surprised their purchase intent is actually up by 120%. It's like 120%. And if I look at Facebook, so a typical Facebook mobile user spends 1.7 seconds on a piece of content before they actually scroll away. But the stats shows that if they watch a video for 10 seconds, the brand awareness actually go up by 220%. It's like 200%. So if there's just one thing I can test in terms of my ads, I'm going to test this. One more stat just to hone that idea in. So we also saw from Facebook ads that 65% of people who watch the first 3 seconds, just 3 seconds, will actually watch for at least 10 seconds more. And 45% of them actually continue to watch for 30 seconds. So what we notice is when we wanted to do marketing experiment, instead of trying to find all the possible things that you want to test, let's go on to one big thing. What is the one thing that we can fix first that can generate the most impact instead of actually trying to experiment a whole lot of different things? So I will go through first a couple of steps for us as a scientific method, as a guide for marketing experiment. So when we're doing this, right, what we need to get used to is uncertainty. There's a lot of times we'll feel that it's uncertain. So when it's uncertain, what we need to do then is just to list down step by step what we can potentially do. So first thing that I will go through later on is identify a business question that we really want to answer. And the keyword is only one business question. Next, we need to outline one hypothesis. We will then decide how to design the experiment, evaluate the results, and actually build upon it. So one key idea to also understand about marketing experiment is that it's not a one-off thing. It's not a single silver bullet that can bring us straight to the final success line that we wanted. It is actually a sequential, a lot of different marketing experiments that we built on it that we can actually eventually taste the success for it. So step number one, best practice number one, is having a very, very clear research questions and a hypothesis. So what we notice when people are doing their marketing experiment, right? If you look at this chart, what I want to bring your attention to is the second rule. So only 15% of people routinely define the question and objective and key metric upfront. Only 15% routinely do that. In fact, what we found out is most of the people spend a lot of time on deciding which methodology to use for the experiment, and also on analysis later. But we have to be clear that if we actually ask the wrong questions, we will eventually never be able to find the data that we really wanted. So how do we really create what we call a structurally sound hypothesis? So a hypothesis has to be a proposed statement that is not a fact, but can be proved right or wrong. So if we collect some data, that data have to be able to prove the hypothesis to be one way or another. If it doesn't achieve that objective, then it's not a solid hypothesis. So one way for us to look at this is this tree phrase there. So we can think of it like, what can we change into what, and will actually bring the effect to our KPI. So an example of this is my problem statement could be the first 5 seconds of my video is not attractive enough and it will cause people to skip the video. So my hypothesis is by changing the 5 seconds of my first video ads to be funny, we will increase people's attentions to watch for at least 10 seconds. So here, what I'm doing here is actually list down 3 very important. What's my problem? What's my proposed solutions? And what's my anticipated results? These are the 3 key things that I will need to list out before I do anything else. And another example could be, if I feel that my lead generation form is very long and causing unnecessary friction, so my hypothesis could be by changing the amount of form fields in my lead generation form from 20 fields to perhaps 5 fields, I will increase the number of leads by 30%. So with that, right, this clear hypothesis is something that we can then work around with and go to the next step. So now I want to give you an example of what Hulu did. So Hulu actually did a couple of tests of their landing page. So let's take a look at what are the different tests they do with their landing page. The left side is the control page. So you always need to set up a control page so that you have a benchmark of what you already have. What they exactly want to do here is they are thinking how to increase their conversion rate by putting on the right value propositions. So hypothesis 1, they feel that the more people know that the more devices they can support, they probably convert better. That's the first hypothesis. Second hypothesis, if I use a headline that communicates a big number of shows and diversity of the titles on my platform, it will increase the conversion rate. So that's that second hypothesis. Third hypothesis is saying that my platform is actually very secure. No worries about any privacy issues. Fourth hypothesis is adding bullet points that communicate a lot of different value that Hulu Plus will have to increase the conversion rate. So notice that this kind of setup, right, of a marketing experiment is actually turns out to be not an effective marketing experiment. The reason why is they are trying to test 4 different value propositions at the same run. Usually what we found is, in the end, they may not be able to find conclusive results because there's actually 4 different hypotheses there. So we always suggest that it's always better to use a simpler way to first ascertain what's the most important factors people take in their decision-making process. So what they eventually found out is, and this is not through the landing page, it's actually through customers poll, they found out that the most single important out of this 4 concept is that people tend to actually convert better if they know that it can support their devices. And if they wanted to use back page to further enhance it, what they can do further is using that hypothesis. So they wanted to know, changing the web page to actually highlight the point that they have more, they can support more devices, can actually convert better. They can then come up with 4 different landing page that actually trying to prove that hypothesis correct or wrong. So this is one of the best practices that we usually advise us to keep to one hypothesis in a single experiment. Now, the second step will then be deciding actually which method should I use to perform my hypothesis testing. There are actually abundance of methods that I can use. And how do I exactly decide which one should I use? Eventually, it's based on the 4 things. How much budget do I have? How much time spent do I have? How much expertise do I have? And what is the nature of data that I need to collect? So what we usually see is this. If we are not very sure about what the most important decision-making process, things that consumer behavior actually thinking at, survey turns out to be the best way to actually more cost-effectively gather that results. So for email testing, definitely is very straightforward. It's definitely if I am testing specific content for the email. However, we do find that sometimes writing a lot of different email contents to just testing the tagline may not actually work as well. So ads testing, I will not go into one by one, but these are basically the 4 reasons that I will then decide which which methods that I will go with. So best practice number 3, choosing the right people to talk to. We will usually ask ourselves 4 questions. Is the people I talk to enough of the sample size so that I don't talk to just a specific segment of people and created a bias? Second, is the setup of my test actually will bias the users? Am I asking a leading questions, for example? Third, do I have enough users to be representative of my population? So it is empirically proven that it takes at least 400 sample size to reach a confidence level of 95%. It doesn't mean that I cannot do testing with smaller numbers of people. It just means that as my sample size goes higher, I will then reach a statistical significance that I will be much more confident of the accuracy. And last one, do I have enough users that I can find? So this is a question that we typically ask whether or not we should be using our internal customer database or using database that is out of our customer base. When we are researching our own customers, right, unfortunately to a certain extent, that might lead to a certain bias because I'm only capturing the customers that I really have. However, if I have a very mass product that I have a really wide range of population of customers, definitely that would be a good idea. So it highly depends on how much database a company has and what kind of data am I trying to gather. Am I just trying to understand my customers, or am I actually trying to understand how to capture other people's customers from my competitions? So there's actually a lot of statistical calculator out there that allow you to calculate the right sample size that you need in order to lead you to more than 95% or 90% of significance. So last but not least, a lot of times we actually view the data when we collect it on an overall view. But what we notice is sometimes you will notice that there might not be a huge difference in the overall. So what should we do? It's very important for us to remember to look at segments. We actually find that more valuable data exists in particular segments rather than just overall top view data. So when I look at segments, I will have 3 things that I look at. First, which segments actually have true value to our business? Meaning their purchasing power could be higher or their purchasing power is actually aligned with what I'm offering. Second, which segments are really actionable, which is segments that I can actually target and not segments that I actually haven't been able to reach yet. Third one, which are most likely to be impacted, the value proposition by the test that we are running. So these are the 3 things that I will look at, and then I will then list down which segments of data that I should look at. So that's the 4 best practices that we usually will encourage to, very importantly, to look at when we are conducting a market experiment. But there's also one last thing that we realize is very important for us to remember. So ultimately, when we are doing experiment like this, right, we do need to work with other stakeholders in the company. And socializing those results within our business becomes a very important thing, so that it's not just us who are interested to actually make the marketing experiment, but it's actually the entire team or even other team that we can collaborate. And that means actually looping them in on the beginning of the process and actually share with them the results when it's up, so that eventually we can successfully become an advocate of marketing experiment within our company. So last but not least, I want to leave you with this. We believe strongly that to get insights, right, you don't have to cause a ton or take a long time. One day is sufficiently enough for you to gather results. So I want to end this with a short introductions of our company. So there are other tools out there. So ours is one of them, whereby we actually provide on-demand consumer insights, where you can actually get results as quick as a few hours. So that's all for what I want to share with you today. Thank you very much, and I hope that I can hear more stories about everyone making more marketing experiments down the line. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julie. That was really insightful. And we do have a few questions already that came in the YouTube chat. So I'll pick them up one by one. So for branding campaigns, how should we assess or compare lift across platforms that have their own brand lift methodologies? So when you think about YouTube, Facebook, and so on, what's your recommendation there?
That is a big problem that everyone faces. So unfortunately, until today, so different platforms, they have different methodology that is really, really hard for us to combine. So we usually recommend 2 things to do. One, unfortunately, you do need to have the tracking data of the importance platform that you want. Let's say YouTube is a very important channels, right? Then you probably need to have a tracking data of that. From there, if you can know what is your ROI conversion from each different channels, you can then put a certain weighting. So let's take an example. 50% of my lead actually comes from YouTube, 20% from Facebook, 30% from Twitter. Just give me an example, right? So I will actually put different weighting and then combine my results and actually use that way to continuously track my results. That's one way for me to combine the brand lift methodology. Second, but when I do that, I also need to be careful of, am I talking to the same segment? So take an example. If I'm talking on social media, on Twitter, I probably talk to a rather different segment than perhaps on LinkedIn. So if I'm combining different tools that have different segments, I will likely not combining at the top line. I will actually need to view it separately on the brand lift effect. So sorry that there is no one clear answer to that, because this is something that we all in this world are still trying to tackle. And that's something that we are using right now.
Then the next question is from Esther. She's asking, what is the test audience sample size for you to generalize the test results to the population?
2 things to look at usually is, if I just give you a bulk number, usually is 400 packs if you are targeting at least 400 packs for a mass population. So when I say this 400, we cannot just look at 400 people. It has to be segmented according to the representations of your country's population. So Singapore has a different census, let's say, as compared to Malaysia. So out of that 400 people, then onto certain criteria such as age, gender, race, region, to the very bare minimum, it has to represent to that population. That's one. Or you can represent it to the customer profile that you believe is yours. So let's say I'm selling a higher end goods. I will need to make sure that my household income criteria is one of that, and I'm only targeting that one. So 400 is generally a number that we go with, but we do need to look at different segments and set a quota within to reach a real representative population.
And we have another question from Rohan. He is asking about conversions between low-risk testing and real-world campaigns. So you mentioned an example of 3 seconds, 76% audience. And how does that translate into our real-world marketing campaigns? Do you see much variation?
So the experiment that we do, right, what it actually allowed us to do is we are much more confident about the eventual video. Take an example, the eventual videos that we're going to push out. So in general, we don't actually post a lot of different video ads with just different first 3 seconds, right? In general, brands just doesn't do that. That means I actually wouldn't be able to, in real life, carry out a real test anyway. You don't see me doing different 3 seconds video, right? So in that case, I can only really do it sort of privately before I launched it, because brand want to maintain a consistent image. So what we can say is, in terms of the ROI, is that if I'm able to capture your attention by making you watch at least 5 seconds to 10 seconds, your brand awareness goes up to 200+%. So that's one. So I can increase your 200+%. So obviously there is still a gap here between, even if I increase your awareness, it doesn't mean that you will convert yet. So in this case, if I only trying to make sure that you were aware of my brand, I actually didn't do the conversion, that will be a separate experiment. But in this case, the KPI is just by increasing a brand awareness.
Thank you, Julie. There is a few more questions. I think it's a topic that's really close to everybody's heart. So the next question is about what tools do you use for your marketing experiments?
Okay, I use a lot of tools. So let me share a little bit different examples. If I wanted to know which value proposition that I am going to select for our different taglines, I will usually first use a survey method, followed by a campaign testing method, let's say on Facebook, social media, or LinkedIn, depends on where my customer base usually is. So I actually use this two-prong. I will use this two-prong before I eventually use the third step, which is going to landing page by using optimized link, for example, to test the landing page design. So I never really use one tool, but it will be a sequential base for me to reach the goal of actually just testing to see which value proposition. But however, if I'm very clear already of my value propositions, I will actually skip the survey. I will skip the ad testing. I will straight go to my landing page and change to see which position should I put my value propositions better. Do I just change my tagline? Do I change my paragraph? Do I change all my landing page even? So I will actually make different landing page. The ones we use is actually optimizedly to reach that goal.
And another question that ties in with this one, if there's any analysis which can suggest which marketing tool or experiment to use against a specific segment.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Does that make sense to you? So if there is any analysis that can suggest which marketing tool or experiment to use vis-a-vis which segment.
Yep. So up to current, not trying to advertise here, so my company is one of them. But other than that, usually there is currently no tool that allows you to immediately see the segment. Rather, you can actually analyze it based on different statistical tools such as SPSS. So in other words, what I see a lot of tools out there, they give you the raw data, but in the end, if you want to drill down to the segment, unfortunately, you may need to actually download the data, put into Excel, if you're very familiar with Excel, or some tools like Tableau or SPSS to actually segment out who exactly you should target. Right now, I don't see any platform out there that pretty much just tell you the segment right away, unless you already target your experiment based on a certain segment, which sometimes could be proven a little bit dangerous because you are skewing and targeting towards a certain segments that you might not know other segments might perform better.
Thank you. And do you take extra precaution steps to ensure that the results are generalizable to the whole population, given that we are just testing a sample?
Yes, actually, that is one of the things. If I cannot get representations, I might as well not really do it. Because why? No matter what experiment I do, I would definitely get results. And it's very hard for you to know whether or not the results that you get, if you target non-representative sample, is accurate or not. And that's very dangerous if I were to act on it. So I will need to be fully confident that the database that I'm reaching out to is representative. I would rather switch for a much representative sample and actually not hitting the 400 sample size. Let's say I have 200 sample size that is representative. I would rather actually use the 200 sample size that is representative. It's better that way. So how do I ensure that it is representative? Usually it has to be done before. So which means you recruit people within that representations. But there's another way, which is at the end of the analysis, you can either throw out certain samples that doesn't fit the representations, or use a technique called weighting technique. So a weighting technique, which is what usually in political poll they used it. So let's say I have more male voice, 60% is male, 40% is female. So I have an overskew of male. But in fact, I only want 50-50%. So I will just use the weighting technique to reduce the 60% voices of male down to 50% and pull up the female voices up to 50%.
And then any, for B2B products and services, what's your recommendation there? What type of experiments are effective?
So the funny thing about this is a lot of times we think that B2B and B2C might be different, but one thing we realize it the hard way itself, we actually realize it ourselves in a lesson, is that selling to B2B, you are actually still selling to a person. It's actually not too different. Yes, your channel might gonna be different, but the way you do experiment is probably the same. It's just mean that you need to find the exact person who are in the job title, the industry, the decision makers in the B2B segment that you wanted. But on the other best practices, it's actually still the same. Not forgetting that B2B ultimately there's a person behind it, and we speak to the person.
Great, thank you, Julie. So then we need to choose a winner, because we do need to leave time also for the last part of our session today, the demo. So apologies to all those whose questions we couldn't cover in the end anymore. So quickly, I'll help you to run through the questions that we had.
Oh, it's okay. I have one in mind.
You have one? Okay, very good.
I know we'll be doing this, so I'm sort of like recording a little bit. A lot of good questions. I think one that I can remember is the third one.
The third question.
Yes, it's a difficult choice, but a choice I have to make.
Sorry, which one was the third one?
I believe it's the video ads.
Yes, yeah. Okay. So congratulations to the winner. We will reach out to you. And thank you again, Julie, for sharing your knowledge with us today and for taking so much time to answer the questions of our audience.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Eva. Guys, we have the demo session next. We'll do it like last time. We'll straight away go into the demo and wrap up the session. So for the demo, we have Edward from Mixpanel. In fact, Julie, your content and stuff that you covered was a good lead for Edward and Mixpanel tool per se as well. So Mixpanel is a product analytics tool which you can use for multiple functionalities, including experiments. And Edward would be taking us through, a specific topic while he demos the tool. It'll be more to how do you identify your funnel drop-offs, any given funnel, and then kind of create that users as a segment to retarget from within Mixpanel itself through push messages, for example. So Edward is head of channel alliances at Mixpanel and a good friend of us. So Edward Zinko is there listening to us as well.
Hey Zinko.
And over to you, Edward. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Harry, and thank you, the DAWS team. I'm a big fan of what you guys do. I used to work with Harry actually a couple jobs ago at a data analytics company. So It's really great to come full circle and to be able to present a little bit about Mixpanel and show you guys the platform. Let me just share my screen. Hopefully it works. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool. So I was saying, like Harry said, it was a really good introduction, actually, Julie, from what you're talking about around data being very difficult to understand and maybe being in different systems and then the second point that she made around segments and trying to understand segments, trying to understand, what are the most important segments and what are the segments that are really driving my business forward, driving my KPIs forward. All of these kind of questions are questions that we see a lot of our customers asking. And it's actually a really good segue into what we do and how we try to solve that answer or solve that problem. So if you guys don't know, like Harry said, Mixpanel is a product analytics platform started in 2009 out of the US. And actually, our founder, he was actually in Stanford. So he was probably about 20 years old, I think, when he first started Mixpanel, second year in Stanford. And he dropped out of Stanford to actually start the company. And this is actually one of the slides in his pitch deck that he used to go out to the Silicon Valley and look to get Series, I think this is Series A funding. Excuse me. And the first slide that he had was essentially most of the world will either make their decisions by guessing or using their gut. They'll either be lucky or wrong. It's pretty harsh thing to say, but even back in 2009 or even now in 2020, a lot of the companies are facing the same problems where although they may have a complicated platform or they may have a data analytics tool, they may be using GA, they may be using a Tableau, it's still very difficult for them to feel confident in using that data and being able to make decisions based on data. So what I want to show you guys today is going to be a deep dive into our platform. Not a deep dive per se, but I'd like to show you guys some of the tools that are extremely important in understanding your cohorts, understanding your users that are engaging with your application, your IoT device, your website, whatever is connected to the internet is what we connect to. And through there, through understanding your cohorts, potentially creating a list of power users or a list of interesting cohorts that you want to understand deeper, diving into that cohort and understanding why is this cohort especially important cohort to my business, why is this cohort driving my KPIs forward, and then from there maybe cutting that cohort apart and trying to market to a certain area of it. So I think through this quick presentation, try not to keep you guys too late. I know it's already around 8:30. I hope you get a good understanding of the space of product analytics and how it differs from, BI tools or marketing analytics like GA. So this is a Mixpanel. This is the dashboard that we can create. This is a typical dashboard that you would see. Essentially, you have a bunch of different types of reports that you can create revolving around whatever types of KPIs you're tracking. This could be, from the acquisition side. This could be from tracking a specific important cohort. In this example, this is kind of like a YouTube media streaming type of example. So, one of the reports that we want to track is how many paid users are we getting over time? Is the number of paid users going up or going down over, this is, I guess, 1 month here. There's a plethora of different types of reports across engagement, acquisition, retention, tracking what types of high value actions are you trying to look after and make sure that you're growing. Is your cohort size growing over time? What types of funnels are you trying to track as well too? So I'll deep dive into a little bit deeper a couple of these reports. But Mixpanel essentially is a tool to help you understand usage and engagement within your product, help you to identify interesting cohorts and surface, and essentially ask questions or answer your questions around your product, right? So hold on a second. Yeah. So so the first thing I'd like to show is, and this is important, is understanding what kind of data Mixpanel can collect. So like I said before, we collect data across all digital properties. So, however many apps you have, however many websites, or even IoT devices. We work with companies like Fitbit, for example. We're collecting data that can be categorized into two types of data. One is event-based data. So all the actions that this person is taking, kind of like a timeline of events. Here, in this example, like a YouTube or a media streaming type example, we're tracking events like when does somebody send a message, when does somebody click on an ad, when does somebody watch a video, when does somebody like a video, maybe they're subscribing to a channel, maybe they're creating a playlist, something like that. So these events here are continuously being tracked and stored, and then within a single event, we can store up to, I think, 2,000 properties, right, within a single event. And this gives you an idea of the depth of data that Mixpanel collects. And this data is key to slicing and dicing your user base, right, and creating those cohorts. So not only am I trying to understand, like, this person is watching a video, but I can understand, when they clicked on this watch video, they were using an Android. And when they clicked on this watch video, the OS version was 5.0. And I can see, information about their country. I mean, this is all custom built, so you can collect whatever type of data you want under a single event. And then on the right side, we have all of the user properties. So kind of like the demographic information. It evolves over time. And we can see that this person originally came in from an organic campaign, for example. Or this person has created 2 playlists so far, right? We have their email, we have their name. For some industries that we work well in, like finance, we can anonymize all this stuff as well too. But being able to actually see your users, understand exactly what these people are doing, it is a big differentiator from companies that are only using something like GA, right, or even 360 or Firebase. So from here, like maybe we want to start to understand our cohorts. And this is a very important tool in Mixpanel. How do we segment our user base, right? How do we build users that we want to start reaching out to? So in Mixpanel, we make it really easy. Like here, you can see all my cohorts here. I can say, like, I want to take a look at all the people that have converted on an ad, maybe, let's say, like one time over the last 7 days. And then I also want to add another condition that says, not only did they convert on an ad, but I also want to see people that have also created a playlist, right? At least one time in the last 7 days. So I can say, like, this is an and function, or maybe I want to say, and then I can actually create a sequence of events within a cohort. So somebody that clicks on an ad in the last 7 days, and then after they click on the ad, then they create a playlist at least one time over the last 7 days. So this can become like as complex as you want. This can become as simple as you want. It's just about your imagination and what types of questions you can ask of your data, and actually you start to cut and slice and dice this. Let's call this test cohort. And here's my test cohort here. I can actually take a look at the users. So out of this test cohort that I just created, remember, it's people that have clicked on an ad and then created a playlist. I have 237 of these users, right? Here's their names, here's their locations. Like Harriet said, we do have a tool that helps to actionize on this data very quickly. You can send out an email or a quick SMS or push notification connected to a webhook. It is a pretty basic tool. So in the case of a more sophisticated use case, or wanting to personalize your messages more, create marketing automation, we actually would refer you to one of our messaging and engagement partners, somebody like a Braze or an Airship, or even Salesforce Marketing Cloud they're able to help a little bit further there. But our core competency is being able to collect the data, being able to surface interesting cohorts, save them, and then push them out to whatever system you have to action on those cohorts. Now, this is a cohort that I prepared beforehand that I think is interesting for you guys to take a look at. So again, we are this YouTube streaming company called MeTube, fake company with dummy data. But one of the very important cohorts that we're tracking is going to be what we call a growth plus paid user cohort, right? And what defines this cohort are people that purchased, maybe they bought a song or maybe they purchased a subscription once in the last month. And then after that, there's a sequence of events. So after they purchased, we want to take a look at people that watched the video and then commented and then liked something. So not only do we want paid users, but we want active users, right? So this is the cohort that we created, this growth plus paid user cohort, right? The next thing we can do with this cohort, and I'm gonna follow this line of this specific cohort throughout the whole demo here. We can actually take a look at well, this is actually the cohort. So there's 95 of these people that are in this cohort here that I would say is probably a very important segment of my audience, maybe even a power user. Maybe these are kind of the people that I want to get more of and I want to understand deeper. So from here, I can actually take a look at the growth rate of this cohort. All right. So this is one of our tools called Insights. It's kind of like your report for basic insights to surface any types of data you want to see. And specifically, I want to take a look at the growth rate of this cohort over time. So over the last 7 days, I didn't have any new cohort, new growth here, but then from Sunday, like I got 95 more people that entered this cohort. From here, there's a lot of things you can do, right? With this cohort, I can compare it to maybe last month, and I can see the growth rate over the last month. So, yeah, I can see that right now, like it's kind of dipped over the last month. This dotted line here is actually the growth rate from last month. So, my growth is at a slower trajectory than it was last month. So maybe I need to take a look at this cohort, figure out what's going on. Why is growth slowing down? Right. So with cohorts, this is kind of the key to the platform, is being able to cut your data up, being able to create a bunch of different cohorts and segments that you are interested in, and then track the growth of this cohort over a period of time. Another thing that we want to take a look at is maybe we just want to take a look at a few very important actions that are happening on my platform, right? So I've identified, like, these are 3 key events that I want to track. I want to understand. I want to understand people that are watching videos, people that are liking videos, and people that are converting on ads. These are 3 very important events that I want to track. And I want to see it in the filter of the cohort, the growth plus paid user cohort that I just showed you guys. So now I filtered all of the data, and I'm only looking at this cohort that I had built previously. And I can see here, I've also created a breakdown. So the important thing of Mixpanel is, you can surface any type of data from any type of action you have. You can start to focus it on a specific cohort, or maybe, I don't want to focus on a specific cohort. I want to see the entire database, all my users. And I want to break down this report, and I want to see it based on app platform. So I have these 3 different events: watch video, like, ad conversion. And I want to see which app platform is the most important for each of these events. So with watching a video, I can see, like, iOS is the one that's tracking the most. And with the like action, Android, people using Android are actually the ones that are tracking the most. With ad conversion, web mobile is actually converting at the highest rate. So maybe what I should do is I should focus a campaign on bringing people to, bringing people on ad conversion through the web mobile. I should focus my advertisements on that channel instead of maybe web desktop, which is the lowest. But again, I want to go back and keep focusing on that cohort because that's an important cohort for my business. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to find this growth and paid user cohort. I'm going to add the filter in. And now I can see if things have changed based on this specific cohort. Maybe it's not app platform. Maybe I want to see, let's see, maybe based on browser history. Maybe browser gives me something interesting. Probably not. The data doesn't seem very significant here. Maybe I can try something else like attribution channel, right? Where are people coming from? Which channel is which channel is driving the most growth for each of these different key actions that I'm tracking for this specific cohort. So for this one, watch video, I can see organic is the top for all three of them, but Google search is number 2 for people watching video, versus, these are, I guess this is like referrals, is number 2 for people to like videos too. What I could do as well is I can compare these actions with this cohort. So let's cut out this attribution channel. I'm going to cut the filter out. So now I'm looking at the entire database again. And instead of filtering it by this cohort, I'm going to break it down by that same cohort. So I'm going to add growth and paid users here. And now I can see the differences between growth and paid users versus all my users. And I can compare it to the past. Maybe I want to take a look at, compare it to the previous month. How are things tracking between these two cohorts? And if I want, I could also I could also change it from numbers to like a relative percentage as well too. Right. So what the Insights tool allows you to do is essentially break down any type of actions that you have, juxtapose that with cohorts, juxtapose that with other types of data, and then you can break it down even deeper if you want to continue adding more and more different data points from different events or different types of cohorts or different types of demographic information as well too. Maybe I want to see based on country code. Then I can see like all the different, from this event, this cohort, these are all the different countries. And I can see, which countries should I be focusing my advertising spend on maybe. All right, so that's breaking down a report and being able to understand the cohort a little bit deeper based on specific actions that you're tracking. The other piece is simply like you want to be able to see a funnel. Right. So right now I've built a funnel, and I know like all of you guys have probably built funnels before, maybe using GA or something like that. But in this case, we're building a funnel based on very specific actions. So in this case, we are doing sign in as the first step, then add conversion, then watch video, and then purchase. These are the 4 key events that we want to track. And we want to do it again in the filter of this cohort. Because we're trying to understand this cohort better. We're trying to understand, how do I improve this cohort, or what are the attributes of this cohort to help me get more people into this cohort? So here I have this basic funnel. I won't break it down yet, and I can see, like, no surprise, this cohort that is a very high functioning cohort. Remember, these are paid users that are highly engaged in the platform. The conversion rate through this funnel is about 74%, right? Which is pretty good, And I can even say, like, I want to see the difference again, just like the other tool. I can break it down between, so see the cohort that, when we take away the cohort, the actual conversion rate is around 47%. And I can juxtapose this cohort again and see the difference in conversion rate between, people that are not in my cohort, which is 44%, versus people that are in my cohort, which is 74%. So I'll take this out and I'll put the filter back in. So we're back to here, this filter. What I want to see now is maybe I don't, like, what is influencing this funnel, right? Like, what is influencing, sorry, I made a mistake. I'm going to take away the filter. I'm just going to look at the cohorts overall. So I have this funnel here. I took away the cohort, and I'm just looking at the funnel for my entire business. For these 4 events, I have a 47% conversion rate. I want to understand, like, what are the different cohorts or segments that are driving this conversion rate up or down, right? Maybe I don't have all the answers. Maybe I have some cohorts that I'm interested in, but maybe there are some cohorts that I haven't thought of. And how do I surface that? Like, how do I have the platform surface that for me? And this is a tool that we have called Find Interesting Segments. So it'll actually send you an email with the time comparison, and it will show you the segments that are driving this cohort up and down. And I actually did this earlier so I could show you guys. So I did this about 2 hours ago, and I can see, since it's called churn risk, the conversion rate is pretty low, minus 54% compared to the overall cohort, versus, I could see like people that are coming in on this app version 3.1.0, the conversion rate is 13% less than the average conversion rate. Here's the cohort that I built before, growth plus paid user. This cohort, the conversion rate, like I showed you guys already, is very high, right? So essentially, a tool to help surface a couple different types of cohorts, like people that create an account that is a creator channel type of account. The conversion rate is lower as well too. So essentially, just a way to kind of automate and do a little bit of machine learning and surfacing some insights for you that you may not have been able to figure out by yourself. So going back to this cohort again, where we are going to filter for the growth and paid users list. So let's bring these guys back. Okay, so I have a 74% cohort conversion rate on this funnel, but I want to actually see it a little bit deeper, and I want to see it based on, let's say, account type, right? So this is the funnel, and if I go to the beginning, like I can see my sign-ins are at 100%, but as I go down, based on the account type, I can see within this high growth cohort, actually, there's 3 different types of accounts. There's a business account, a creator channel account, and a personal account, right? And although the overall conversion rate is high, 74%, like we showed before, a lot of it is being driven by business accounts. Business accounts account for, they're driving at 82% conversion rate. Whereas when I look at like creator channel accounts and personal accounts, the conversion rate is much less compared to the business account. So I have to think to myself, as a marketer and as a product manager, like, how do I improve the experience for these types of account users, creator channel and personal channel? And I see here the drop off, right? So when I get to this stage, I'm getting some drop off from creator channel account. And I can click here, so I can see the actual people that have actually converted, or I can actually see the people that have dropped off at this stage. So in this sense, these are people that have logged in, clicked an ad, watched the video, but did not make a purchase, and they have a creator channel account. I can create this cohort, drop off at this step. I can save this cohort. Oops. Okay, I have some error here. Okay, it's saying that I need to change the date on this cohort. Okay, but essentially what I can do is I can create a cohort based on the drop-off or based on people that completed the step. And then I can activate that cohort just like I showed you guys earlier. Here's like the list of cohorts. And then I have all of these cohorts that I created. Like this is one that I created earlier. I can click on this one, and then I can view the users. I can select them all, and then I can either push them to my marketing automation platform or my messaging tool, or I can send them a quick one through Mixpanel too. Right. Last thing to show you guys is this is our integrations. Like I showed you, you create the cohorts in Mixpanel, and then you're able to push them into, well, we have integrations with Google, GCP. We have integrations with AWS and integrations with Snowflake if you're using like a data warehouse, or if you're using some of these marketing tools like Iterable, Airship, Braze, Marketo, or even if you want to push those cohorts to Facebook ads and Google ads to do better targeting, you can do that with our in-house integrations as well. Right. So I hope that shows you guys a little bit about what a cohort can do for your business from a product analytics perspective, combining all these different product usage data points into creating that cohort, and then analyzing that cohort from different activities perspectives, juxtaposing it with the rest of your database, and then trying to understand the funnel around this cohort and how to optimize that funnel too. I think we have just about 10 minutes left, so I'll flip it back over to Harry. We can do the Q&A.
Perfect. Thank you, Edward. That is very interesting, and I think most of our audiences are familiar with GA, Google Analytics, or Adobe Analytics, and they would be able to relate it as well. Questions are flowing in that manner as well. So let's jump straight to the questions. First one is more on JEO. How is cross-device activity accounted for? Right? If say I use iOS and then I move to my desktop, how is this accounted for, and the cohort retargeting works? And there's another question on the same line, so I'll just combine both to make it easier for you. If I'm logging in using my email on one device, and if I'm logging in, or not logged in on another device, would you be able to stitch? Right. So it's more on the cross device, and how do you identify me across devices? Yeah.
I am not a technical person, unfortunately, or a sales engineer, but we do cross device stitching. So essentially, like, we would be implementing the SDKs onto the apps and onto the website, and we'd be able to identify, if you were crossing over. We place like a I guess it would be like a cookie onto the browser, so we'd be able to track what you're doing. And we also, once you enter through an app, we will create a profile of you, like we call it a distinct ID. So it doesn't matter whether you're coming from web or coming from app or IoT, all the data is flowing in under that distinct ID, and that's how we are able to unify that experience.
Right. I think, I mean, it's similar like any other tool, right? Mostly based on cookie, or for post-logged in users, maybe it's through an user ID.
Yeah.
Second question is how is it different from segments created in Google Analytics? I think it should be a common question that you face, right? How is it different from the other similar tools?
Yeah. So yeah, good question. Like, Google Analytics is obviously the default for companies that are just starting in analytics, especially focused in marketing analytics, and especially if they're using AdWords a lot. You think about why Google created GA in the first place. It was to help support their AdWords, right? It was kind of like an add-on to you creating an AdWords account and being able to track your spend through GA. So we see Google Analytics not as a competitor, but as a partner. A very, very important tool that Mixpanel itself uses and invests in, but a tool that doesn't track. It is not focused on tracking product analytics, product engagement. Doesn't allow you to understand, identify users in your platform, and actually put a name to them. And we see them tracking very different things. So a lot of our customers will use both Mixpanel and GA. Even some of them will use 360 and Mixpanel. So it is a complementary tool that I think has both have very strong points to understanding your marketing analytics and your product analytics. On the question of Segment, we are a very close partner of Segments. So a lot of our clients are joint clients together. Segment will allow you to capture the data across all your different platforms, and allow you to implement just one SDK that can and then integrate to hundreds of different integrations that they have. Mixpanel being one of the key ones in the product analytics space. Whereas if you don't use Segment, you can still implement Mixpanel. You do the same thing. You'd implement the SDK. You'd custom code in all the different events that you want to track. But if you wanted to add another tool to it, you'd have to do that for another tool. Whereas with Segment, all you have to do is implement it one time, and then it patches out to all the different other marketing tools or analytics tools, or they have hundreds and hundreds of integrations out there. So it's a very complementary tool as well, and a lot of our customers use both.
Got it. Right. Thanks, Edward. And the last question was like, do you use any cloud technology, to kind of stitch this data as your backend as well?
So our platform is built on GCP. So we have our data centers back in the US, and we have integrations to the other like data warehouse platforms, like you can see here. But our system itself is built on GCP, on top of GCP.
Got it. And we just got one more from Cinco. Can you push raw data into Google BigQuery?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we can. It happens right here. So you can sync Mixpanel on an hourly or daily frequency to BigQuery, and then Mixpanel as a focus for collecting product information, customer and user engagement information on your website or apps will then get pushed into BigQuery to be cross-analyzed with maybe like some of your business operations data or some of the other internal data that you wouldn't collect through Mixpanel.
Got it. Cool. So those were the questions, Edward. I'll quickly, run you through the same, right? And then you can choose the best question. So first one was more on the cross-device. How do you accommodate cross-device and create the cohorts? Second one was on how is it different from Google Analytics. Third one was do you use cloud technology? And fourth one was on the integration with Google BigQuery.
Cool. I guess I would pick the differences with GA and segment. I like that question because I get it a lot, and I think it's important for me to be able to have a chance to make the distinction. Companies around the world are still using GA and trying to do a lot of this stuff, even using a Tableau or using whatever BI tool they're doing. And it makes it very difficult. Like the goal that we have here is how do we create an analytics platform that is essentially self-serve, where you don't need to have a data analyst, you don't need to have someone that's like a Adobe specialist or or a Tableau specialist in your company, but all your product managers, even your marketing team, would be able to have access to customer engagement data, be able to create these kind of cohorts, and be able to actually use this data to influence their strategy. So yeah, thank you for answering that question, so I can surface that.
Yeah. Thank you, Edward. Thanks a lot. That kind of brings us to the wrap. So before we close off, again, thanks to our sponsors for having this event sponsored and up and running. Thanks to audiences for supporting us throughout. One thing that we would want to call out is please look out for kind of feedback and survey kind of questions coming to you. This will help us understand how better can we run these events moving forward before we get back to our original format as well. So again, calling out our sponsors, Decision Science, Happy Marketer, and eClerks. Thank you for continuously supporting us. And last but not the least, thanks for speakers for sparing time amidst your busy day and sharing your knowledge across different topics.
Thank you, Harry, and Eva, and Jeremy.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye.